What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about Black Panther, number 6 by John Ridley and Juan Cabal, and in this video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly why new Black Panther character Omalola is not the traitor and who we should really be looking at. We're also going to be talking about why is Black Panther on the run from Wakanda and no longer has access to all his high-tech gear and his vibranium suit, and we're also going to talk about who are the only people T'Challa can trust when all Wakanda wants him dead. We're going to be talking about all this and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about why Omalola is not the traitor. Now, to do this, we gotta go back to Black Panther number 5. With Black Panther number 5, one of the things we learned is that Omalola was innocent because, well, for one, she said she was innocent. She has nothing to hide. Even though she did technically try to kill T'Challa, she was merely defending herself because she knew T'Challa would come at her with everything that he had. Not only was she defending herself, but the idea that she would kill Jai seems kind of ridiculous because, well, why would she? She had no reason to. Even knowing that T'Challa and Jai had some form of a relationship which has yet to be fully defined yet, but whatever it was, T'Challa and Jai, they cared about each other and had a deeper affection for one another that Omalola couldn't compete with. And while Shuri initially thinks that maybe that was why Omalola would have killed Jai, at least as far as Omalola's concerned, that wasn't the case. She's not that petty, and she's not some swooning damsel woman who just falls into female stereotypes at the drop of a hat. It's just not who she is as a character. Now, that's not to say Omalola isn't 100% innocent of all wrongdoing. Something tells me she knows more about what's going on than maybe even T'Challa does, or even Shuri for that matter. She knows some things about what's going on behind the scenes in Wakanda, and right now, the only people who can help T'Challa in his moment of need, which we're going to be talking about here very shortly, are going to be Shuri and Omalola. That's going to be tricky because Omalola is technically supposed to be behind bars. However, Shuri is going to bust her out of prison, and she's going to give Omalola back her vibranium suit so that they can bring justice to Wakanda in T'Challa's name. As it stands right now, Shuri realizes there's really only one person who could stand to gain from Wakanda being in this particular state, and that character is one that we have pointed a lot of blame at recently, and that's Prime Minister Folasade, a new character who has been introduced as, well, as I just said, the Prime Minister of Wakanda. Wakanda is no longer a monarchy, it's now a democracy. They have senators and governors, and right now Prime Minister Folasade is the one who kind of presides over all of it, and while there are elected officials who represent the people of Wakanda, Prime Minister Folasade is basically the final say on pretty much all of it. With T'Challa being there as well as king in an unofficial capacity, but he has no real power anymore in this new democracy, and Prime Minister Folasade wants him completely out, even though it did seem like initially she wanted him to be involved. And while I do think Prime Minister Folasade is a lot of the blame behind what's been going on recently, especially with these nameless assassins that have been trying to come after all of T'Challa's sleeper agents in Project Kill Switch, I don't think she's really the one who's like 100% behind all of this. Another character is one who I'm starting to point a lot of fingers at, and that is the character Akili. Akili is a relatively new character by comic book standards, having been created back in 2016 during the Ta-Nehisi Coates run on Black Panther, but he has proven himself a very loyal friend to T'Challa and has been the leader of Wakanda's secret police, the Hattusarazi. And even though Akili has seemed to back a lot of T'Challa's plays, he just kind of throws T'Challa under the bus almost out of nowhere, while T'Challa and Prime Minister Folasade are in the Senate trying to figure out what to do next. He pretty much throws out the fact that T'Challa had Project Kill Switch in his back pocket, that he had sleeper agents stationed all over the world, and even tries to frame it as though he would use them to try and take back power and rulership, mind you, of Wakanda. Even on a point throwing in his lot with Folasade in the previous issue, and while they kind of made it seem as though Folasade was, trying to get him on board, now I'm starting to think that with this framing, I think she was trying to get him on board with what she was doing, but I think what's going on with these nameless assassins, I think this has more to do with Akili and she just doesn't know about it. I think T'Challa is being assaulted from both sides, with one side not really knowing what the other one's actually doing. Because we see at a point where after T'Challa is stripped of his vibranium armor and is about to be arrested, T'Challa breaks free and takes off into the wilds of Wakanda, fighting back against his own secret police. And while all this is going on, even while these Hattusaraze are trying to take him down and literally hunting him with impunity, there's a point where Folasade questions whether or not they should kill him, and Akili doubles down on it. He is completely doing a 360 heel turn, and we know that there was some evidence that led Shuri to believe that he was responsible for the explosion in her lab. Shuri doesn't outright accuse him, but she does say some things that lead us to believe in Black Panther number 3, the security forces told her a story that didn't make any sense. And honestly, with the actions that Akili has been taking against T'Challa and all this, it almost kind of makes sense now. Akili is very likely going into business for himself, pulling a move that's not too dissimilar for something we've seen in the character White Wolf, who was a character you probably would have seen around more often if you were reading Black Panther around the time of the Christopher Priest run back in, I guess it was the early 2000s. Which is even more interesting when we consider that White Wolf has just recently turned back up in the Sam Wilson Captain America series, with T'Challa's Quoddy Finger's treachery being put in full view of Prime Minister Folasade, that he was hoarding sleeper agents and had secret programs in place that are presumed to undermine the democracy of Wakanda. T'Challa is pretty much being charged with treason, high treason at that. Hence why he's been stripped of everything that could potentially give him an edge to get away from Wakanda. Now that I've thrown Akili under the bus, it's time for me to defend him, because while the idea of Akili betraying T'Challa would be one of the more interesting options for John Ridley to go with, I also think it's the one that makes the least amount of sense. And I actually think that Akili is playing the long con and T'Challa is in on it. T'Challa's deceptions can run incredibly deep, and there is a conversation that is had, and something that Akili specifically says to T'Challa not too terribly long before he ousted him to Prime Minister Folasade during the formal inquiry. When T'Challa says that your defense is appreciated, but not necessary, Akili says that as far as he's concerned, T'Challa is Wakanda, and he will always defend Wakanda. And just a mere 4 or 5 pages later, he's throwing T'Challa under the bus, even after he's already tried to defend T'Challa to Folasade. Now suddenly he's saying that he doesn't trust T'Challa, he's throwing T'Challa under the bus, calling him treasonous and treacherous, and now suddenly he's aiming to kill T'Challa? Let's be real here. Akili knows he can't take T'Challa. Even with his best trained war dogs in the Hattusaraze, he knows he could never take him down. He knows he's just throwing them to the wolves. What he is doing, I think, is a smokescreen to get closer to Folasade, and maybe, just maybe, this is T'Challa's way of digging up evidence as to whether or not Folasade is in league with those nameless assassins. Or he could actually just be on that Fox News bullshit. You never know. Regardless of whether it's Akili or Folasade, the point of the matter is, Insurrection and Civil War is coming to Wakanda, and it does appear the Hattusaraze are in on the whole thing. And if that's the case, it's very likely Akili is actually the bad guy in all this. And the only reason I say that is because at a point we do see the Hattusaraze trying to attack Prime Minister Folasade in future issues, as well as the backup story in Black Panther number 3 that was the first appearance of new Black Panther character Tosin, and this story taking place a little bit ahead of current events, revealing the Hattusaraze as having rebelled against the crown. And of course, going back to future solicits, we know that Tosin is at some point going to be battling against the Hattusaraze in defense of Prime Minister Folasade, and regardless of whether Shuri is on the same side of him or not, at any point in time when he's defending Folasade, there are depictions of Shuri and Tosin fighting alongside one another to take the Hattusaraze down. So yeah, even with that defense of Akili, I'm still leaning towards him being the culprit. Or worst case scenario, he lost control of his secret police. Either way, future solicits have already kind of given us the answer, just in the sense that pretty much none of them show Akili being present, which is likely to hide this plot twist. Now, T'Challa is not 100% on his own here. Now, of course, we know he has Omalola and Shuri, but another character who is seemingly coming to his aid is the character Storm. And not because he needs help. She's actually come to Wakanda to take him down a notch because of what he did using Gentle as a Wakandan sleeper agent as a part of the Project Kill Switch as mentioned earlier. She feels that, once again, T'Challa has betrayed her trust, and while this brings up a bunch of their old marital woes, things that mostly occurred during the Avengers vs. X-Men event, things that led to T'Challa and Storm being at odds with one another because, of course, Black Panther was on the Avengers side of things, and Storm was on the X-Men side of things. You would probably not be too surprised by that, but this was all framed in such a way that T'Challa tries to make it seem as though those woes were not him trying to shut her out, or that he didn't love her anymore. He didn't annul their marriage because he had fallen out of love with her. He annulled their marriage because he knew there were certain things that he would need to do as King of Wakanda, and that she would need to do in duty to the X-Men, that it just wouldn't have worked out if they stayed married, and it would have compromised them, not to each other, but to their respective sides. And while there is, a little bit of truth to that, because one of the things that did come up roughly around the time of Civil War and Avengers vs. X-Men is whose side is who on. Is Storm gonna side with the Avengers, or your Tony Stark for that matter, when all of the chicanery with Civil War came to a head? When the Avengers are going against the X-Men, whose side is she going to be on? A lot of times that was called into question, and Black Panther realized, apparently, at least without telling anyone, that this was always going to be the case, and that Storm had a path that she had to walk that only she could walk, and T'Challa would have only held her back, even kind of implying she wouldn't have reached the heights that she has reached if she would have remained as Queen of Wakanda. The fact that she had moved on to lead an X-Men team yet again, and then also becoming the leader of the Soul System, the voice of the Soul System in light of all things that just happened in the aftermath of House of X. T'Challa says he didn't want to get in the way of that, and this is one of those areas where Storm kind of points out in what T'Challa is saying, largely pointing at the fact that he is saying these things because while yes, he may actually believe them, it's the fact that he runs away from things. He tries to isolate himself from people because he doesn't know how to be in a relationship. And this even brings up the feelings that T'Challa once again has about Jai, something where he says that Jai was the only person he truly cared about, but when he said it, he didn't mean to say it in such a way to make it seem as though he didn't care about Storm, but Storm knows what he truly meant. Once again, this is one of those things where I feel like John Ridley is kind of hinting at some things, and maybe there was some deeper connection between Jai and T'Challa. Whether that connection goes beyond being just friends is a whole other story. I don't really know what it is John Ridley's trying to say here, but I'm just gonna assume that T'Challa had a type of bond with Jai that just transcended all of that they were literally the best of friends, even though we never really heard about Jai up until recently, but maybe that was because he was a sleeper agent. In a lot of ways, this kind of mirrors, not to get off on a tangent here, kind of mirrors some of the things we've heard about wrestlers like Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, that these two guys, even though there was no, at least as far as anyone knows, there was no homosexual relationship between the two, but they were such good friends that when one of them passed, the other one just didn't know how to deal with it. It ultimately led to this guy going down a spiral that ultimately led to him killing his own wife and child, and then eventually himself. Not saying that that's what T'Challa is gonna do, just saying that sometimes people have friendships that are a lot like romantic relationships, but they're not really romantic relationships. It's like someone being your soulmate, but not necessarily being your romantic partner. And I think that's what T'Challa had with Jai. While some people may try and take the low-hanging fruit and think that maybe John really is hinting that T'Challa might have secretly been gay or bisexual, I don't think that's the case. Even though T'Challa and Storm, their relationship, while it seems like it was finally getting back where it needed to be, or where I think a lot of the fans wanted it to be, now, all of a sudden, it seems like he has said or done something that could have potentially jeopardized it once again. The lies are one thing, but I think some of the truths that came out, I feel like could potentially damage even further their relationship, as much as it could be even more damage considering the fact that it is brought up and actually addressed in this comic. And this is something that I kind of criticized Ta-Nehisi Coates' run for, and even the Marauders issue in question where this is mentioned, that Storm had stolen an artifact from Wakanda that Wakanda didn't want her to have, and that T'Challa had, for all intents and purposes, stonewalled Wakanda against Krakoa. These were things that were never really addressed in those comics, or any of the other respective comics since then, and honestly, John Ridley's Black Panther run is the first time that the Black Panther side of things even acknowledges that any of these things have ever happened. All that aside, Storm seems like she's willing to help T'Challa in his effort to try to restore his good name in Wakanda and help stop these sleeper agents from wreaking any more havoc. But one of the things that I think this could potentially do is, as Akili says, if Storm is helping T'Challa, this could potentially lead to war between Wakanda and Krakoa. This is something that has kind of been on the table for a while. Since House of X, it has been revealed that Wakanda and Krakoa are not friendly with one another, and over the course of comics since House of X, it has been reiterated on multiple occasions. Wakanda doesn't want anything from Krakoa and doesn't see them as a legitimate nation. They pretty much reject all their Krakoan medicines. They no longer have a Krakoan gate. They don't see themselves as a safe haven for mutants. Not saying that they would go after them, but they're just not a place that would willingly harbor mutants on any major scale. Pretty much being what Wakanda has always been towards mutants. They pretty much just kind of judge them on a case-by-case basis, but on the whole, don't really trust them either. If what Akili is saying could hold any weight whatsoever, it does seem like maybe somewhere down the road, we are going to end up seeing, especially since Storm is, for all intents and purposes, attacking the secret police of Wakanda, this could be seen as an act of aggression in the eyes of the United Nations and in Wakanda themselves for that matter. They could, for all intents and purposes, go to war with Krakoa, and they would be well within their rights to do so, that a mutant, at least a singular mutant, had attacked them. They could spin this in such a way and try and make it seem as though this was the case. And it also kind of makes me wonder if Orcus is even watching in on some of this, and if they're going to try and reach out to Wakanda in some way, but I kind of feel like Wakanda wouldn't have them. All that said, Shuri and Omalola had earlier in the issue, they reached out for backup to try and help T'Challa, and while T'Challa initially thought that Storm was the backup, that wasn't the case. Shuri didn't reach out to Storm at all. As we said earlier, Storm came to Wakanda of her own volition after she learned the truth about Gentle. The people who Shuri reached out to were the Dora Milaje themselves, Ayo and Anika, and presumably Zenzi, the younger Zenzi from the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda. Maybe she's around there somewhere because she has been training with the Dora. The Dora Milaje are stepping out of the shadows and resuming their place at T'Challa's side. Now, this isn't to say that, T'Challa has his Dora Milaje back. No, they are still very much their own people now. The Dora Milaje have distanced themselves from the throne, and this was all during the era of the Ta-Nehisi Coates run. Very early in that run, the Dora had pretty much rejected Wakanda and started their own nation in the Jabari lands. After taking down M'Baku's cousin Mandala, who had also taken on the moniker of Man-Ape, Mandala was abusing his power in the Jabari lands, and the Dora Milaje avenged the dead of the villages that his people had raided. And I think it's safe to say, while they are willing to help T'Challa, I don't think they're doing this for T'Challa. I think this is more of a favor to Shuri than it is of a favor to T'Challa himself, because while the Dora Milaje, they don't hate T'Challa anymore, they were more than willing to come together to help T'Challa in his hour of need to take down Onjadaka and Eric Killmonger. However, that alliance was tentative. They still want to keep their own lands and stay separate from the Golden City, no longer being in service to a king of any kind, but leading and ruling themselves. But that just said, this just shows and kind of reaffirms that some of the most powerful people in T'Challa's life, some of the strongest people, the most dependable people that T'Challa is orbited by, are always going to be the women in his life. T'Challa has always had strong women in his orbit, characters like Queen Ramonda, his own stepmother, Shuri, his half-sister, the Dora Milaje, and even the more recent character Omalola, and of course, his on-again, off-again Boothang, Storm. right now he's going to have to rely on all of them just to set things right. Now with this, I think we're finally going to start getting some answers, and I even wonder if the White Wolf himself is involved in any of this, considering his recent return, and we all know how the White Wolf feels right now about Sam Wilson being Captain America, and that he is trying to destabilize governments, not just in Wakanda, but the entire world. Something tells me he would have more than enough time to point some of his attention in T'Challa's direction, but that right now remains to be seen. I don't know, we don't really have any hard evidence that connects the White Wolf to these nameless assassins, but considering that he used to lead the Hatut Zarazi before Akili, it wouldn't be that surprising. But anyways, that's everything that I wanted to talk about with Black Panther number 6, and even Black Panther number 5 for that matter. There's a lot of really good stuff here, and while there's definitely some things I didn't touch on, that was really the main meat of the matter I wanted to discuss. I'm very interested to see where a lot of this goes. The whole kill switch thing, and the sleeper agents, and T'Challa being ousted from Wakanda. A lot of this isn't necessarily like the newest of ideas. T'Challa has always kind of been a guy who kept secrets and was always at odds with people trying to take over his country or trying to dethrone him. It's kind of just a major thing with T'Challa. It's one of the things where I know a lot of people are kind of tired of it. I know I've seen people complain about how, he's always losing his kingdom. He's always got threats coming of a political nature. It's kind of just par for the course when you're a superhero who also doubles as a king. Though I will say, I'm hoping that this goes a direction that previous stories have not gone, because otherwise I feel like you're just going back to the well too many times. And while this isn't the first time that T'Challa has faced Insurrection, it is definitely starting to get old to me. Not saying that I'm not enjoying this run. It is definitely something that I'm kind of waiting to see where this goes. How is this going to play itself out before I render full judgment on what John Ridley's doing with Black Panther so far. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you Hulk smash that like button, and also make sure you hit subscribe. I post videos like this throughout the week breaking down comics and comic book characters, so if you want to see more, definitely hit that subscribe button and make sure you tap that bell so that way you don't miss anything. And also, if you want to see more awesome videos about Black Panther, or maybe you heard about the Black Panther Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda story arc, and you're curious about learning more about that story, I have a video series right here telling you everything you need to know about that entire arc. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about Black Panther number 6, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.